Hi, today we're joined by Hazel Gale. She's a former kickboxing world champion and a national boxing champion. Nice to meet you.
Hi.
Good to see you. And she's the author of the book, Fight. Okay. All right, I'm going to get straight into it. Straight with the first question. What made you write a book like Fight?
Well, I'd been practicing as a therapist for 7 years, at the point at which I started writing that book.
Yeah.
And I was really inspired by the way that clients can solve their own problems. Mm-hmm. They just need to be asked the right questions and given the tools. Mm-hmm. And the thing about therapy is, even unless you get it through the NHS, it can be prohibitively expensive for so many people. And that's just the way it is. But I think that people can make these changes without needing to fork out all that money, and the people who can't make them fork out that money should be able to make the changes. Yeah. So I wanted to write a book which gives the tools to the people who can't make it to a therapy couch, basically.
Okay. Can you give people an insight of what the book entails, what it's got going on inside of it?
Well, it's a big mix of things. So the theme that runs through it is every chapter it begins with an anecdote from my experience. So my background is in boxing and kickboxing, obviously. Yeah. And I burnt out horribly after a few years of just putting way too much pressure on myself, which I know is something that happens to lots of athletes, and it's something that we do in all sorts of careers. You don't have to be a sports person to burn out. Yeah. So there's the narrative arc, if you like, of the book is it follows my striving and then my crash and then what I had to do to get myself back into competition and back into a healthy and balanced way of life, basically. Okay. And then after the anecdotal sections, there is theory in each of the chapters and tasks and processes and questions for people to answer if they want to do that part of it. I suggest to anyone buying it that they should just read through the first time, because those tools are there for life, basically. They read through, get an idea of it, and then they can come back and apply any of the processes to any problem that they might have at any stage later.
So what came in your mind when you was writing Monster, the Mind Monster?
Yeah, so the idea of the monster is we all have parts of our personality that we aren't prepared to accept. We don't like, we don't think they are. I think what it comes down to is we don't think they're fit for display, so we try to hide them. And we all have these parts. Jung called this the shadow self. It's there. And the thing is, if you keep ignoring it, it just gets bigger and stronger. Yeah. It becomes a monster. Okay. So that's the idea with the monster, is that it's just the parts of us which are totally human and normal, but for some reason or other, because of things our parents said or because of things our school friends said, we've decided that those bits are not okay, and so we spend our life trying to suppress them and back them down. We might try to drink them away, we might try to hide them by making ourselves small or quiet, we might try to overachieve them out of the picture, which is what I tried to do. Okay. So a big part of my shadow self, my monster, was made up of fear of weakness, fear of failure. And because of those fears, I strove as hard as I could in things like sport and everything else I did, and achieved pretty good results along the way, but I never got to enjoy any of those results because I was so afraid, what if the next one I fail and everyone finds out that really I'm weak, or really I'm useless, pathetic. So, I think a lot of sports people recognise that. You have this feeling like, okay, I'm not good enough right now, but if I can just win that race, or if I can just get onto that team or whatever it is, then I'll feel okay. But then we get that thing and we're like, still don't really feel great. So obviously that didn't really count. Now I need this. And as a result of that pattern, we can achieve loads, but we never really get to stop and smell the roses. Okay. So I wanted to write a book for people that would find themselves in that pattern in any walk of life, and to teach them how to stop and embrace the monster rather than fight it. Because the beauty is that when you do that, that part of you is actually really, really beautiful and vital. It helps us to connect to people. It's part of our creativity. It can essentially make us more successful, more creative and more connected. Yeah. As long as we learn how to bring it back onto the team. Okay. So that's what the book's about. So
what little piece of advice would you give to an athlete that is going through this at the moment?
Buy the book.
Smart move. Good start.
It's about we often, when we get into any kind of problem, whether it's a physical problem like a body's not playing ball, or a mental problem, we're getting anxious, or we're getting angry, we're withdrawing, it's tempting to look for a fix. So we'll go and look for the supplement that's going to make it better, or the coach that's going to make it better, or whatever. We always seek for help from outside, as if we can't help ourselves.
Yeah.
And we get into this pattern, and really the world wants us to be in this pattern anyway. It's a consumer. We're in a consumer world.
Yeah.
So it teaches us from a very young age that as long as you pay a little bit of money, somebody's going to come along and
fix it,
make your world perfect. So I think the first tip is to recognise that you don't need anybody else to do these things.
Yeah.
Yes, some people we need, that's a silly thing to say, we need other people, but we don't need them in the way that we are taught to believe that we do. I really do believe that everyone can solve their own problems as long as they've got the tools to do it. So the first thing is to stop looking for the quick fix on the outside and actually take a long, hard, decent look at what's going on in here.
Yeah.
Because that's where you're going to find the answers.
Okay. So are you spiritual in any way, or is it just a mindfulness that you have with people or for yourself?
It's a really good question. I'm growing increasingly spiritual, but I don't have any formal religious beliefs.
Okay.
But interestingly, my whole career as a therapist was based around this idea of finding a way to sort of create these mental superpowers without needing to believe in any kind of woo-woo stuff.
Yeah.
No kind of spiritual God, universe, all that business.
Yeah.
But as I wrote the book, actually, I just started connecting more and more to a vaguely spiritual feeling of a greater sense of self and connected consciousness and all this stuff.
Yeah.
So even though I'm not fully involved in that yet, it's getting there, and I'm enjoying the exploration, actually.
Okay. So do you feel that this book would help people in all walks of life, not just sportsmen, maybe businessmen or businesswomen?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. I think the reason people idolise sports people so much is it is such a great metaphor for everything else.
Yeah.
We look at somebody at the Olympics or playing on our favourite football team, and we connect with them because we see the effort they're putting in, and we see their highs and their lows, and we live the successes with them and the failures.
That's true.
And so we're all used to identifying with sports people. So this is a book that talks a bit about sport from my personal perspective, but it's not a book about boxing. It's not a book about sports.
Okay.
It's a book about life.
Life in general.
Yeah. So anyone who's living can benefit from it.
Okay. So do you feel that there's a lot of athletes that are dealing with the monster themselves?
Everyone has a monster.
Yeah, not just athletes.
Yeah, not just athletes, but I mean, there's no. I wouldn't believe anyone who said, "Yeah, I definitely don't have that. I don't have a shadow self. I don't have a part of me that I'm not willing to look at."
Yeah.
Even people who've spent decades doing therapeutic work and meditation and all sorts of stuff, that yes, they're going to be much more in touch with their shadow, but there's always going to be things to discover.
Yeah.
It's an ongoing process. We can do this until the day we die, and that's a good thing. The more we do it, the more powerful we become. But it's not a case of, right, I've done that, now tick.
Okay.
So yeah, every sports person has a monster. And also, sports people, I mean, I think that every sports person has a duty to themselves to look into the psychological side of their sport. We're all very used to training our bodies. We know that you have to get to the gym 2 times a day, whatever it is that we're doing.
Yeah.
But we don't sit and do the work on our minds. And yet, it's our minds that are in control. It's our minds that determine whether we crumble or rise up at that really crucial moment. It's not we have to get our bodies ready to be physically capable of doing it.
Yeah.
But in that moment, it's our minds that decide. And how many athletes will be able to think back to one occasion when they just screwed up and they don't know why?
Yeah.
Most of us know those moments.
Yeah, we all.
Yeah. And so what we can say, why did that happen to me? Well, the answer is the monster. And that's why I'm saying if we look inside. And I'm doing this to the monster because we put it outside ourselves.
Yeah.
Because we're like, no, I don't want to talk about that bit. Don't like that bit. But as long as we're doing that, it just gets more and more monstrous. Once we bring it in here, that's when it can be powerful.
Yeah. So you believe that people like Usain Bolt, Anthony Joshua, CEOs of the world, billionaires, they all have that monster outside?
Guaranteed.
Guaranteed that they have
Guaranteed.
it. Yeah.
And actually, sometimes I think the bigger the success, the bigger the monster.
Yeah.
Because I'm not saying always, but if somebody has got to the top of their game because they're fighting against their insecurities, and people really can do that.
Yeah.
So Michael Phelps was someone who was very famous for saying that he hated losing more than he enjoyed winning.
Okay.
So he was obviously, he's the most medalled Olympian of all times.
Yeah.
And he did incredible things in that sport, but he actually said, I was running and fleeing from whatever it is that I was running from. I think that's almost a direct quote. He's talking about running from his monster, and then he got done for drinking under the influence a few years ago, and that forced him to address it, and he went into rehab, and then he came back after retirement, and it was in Beijing, I believe. I can't remember that at the Olympics actually, but when he came back after retirement, he looked like a different athlete. He still won, like virtually everything. He was still amazing, but now he's smiling and connected, and he enjoyed it.